I played golf with him. He said it's time to move and promote your bill. If you buy goods from Russia and don't help Ukraine, there is a 500% duty on your products. India and China buy 70% of Putin's oil. Is it really time to impose new sanctions against Russia? What does Donald Trump really think about this? Why did French President Emmanuel Macron talk to Vladimir Putin on the phone? We talk about all of this on air with a Republican. My name is Anastasiia Norytsyna, and on the line with us is Boris Pincus, a social activist and president of the Ronald Reagan Republican Club. Hello, Boris Yakovlevich. I'm glad to welcome you. Good afternoon, dear viewers. Glad to be on your channel. Glory to Ukraine. Glory to the heroes. Friends, send your questions. Indicate from what country and city you are watching us. Don't forget to give us a like and share your opinion on the topics we discuss. How serious is all this? Or will the sanctions repeat the history with tariffs? First introduced, then cancelled, accompanied by different formulations. President Donald Trump believes that the time has come to impose new sanctions against Russian Federation. This was stated by Republican Senator Lindsey Graham on the air of ABC News. He expressed confidence that Trump will sign the document if it is approved by U.S. lawmakers. According to Graham, this could happen as soon as the day after the July recess, which was supposed to end on July 6th, but, as I understand it, ended a little earlier. Has Trump finally realized that Putin is leading him around by the nose, Boris Yakovlevich? In my opinion, there will be no procrastination. There is nowhere to retreat further. There are several reasons for this. The first is the successful summit in The Hague. Trump, inspired by what he considers his victory in the conflict with Iran and support for Israel, has agreed to strikes on Iranian nuclear facilities. He is confident that these centers are virtually destroyed and Iran's nuclear program is terminated. Although experts believe that it is more about damage rather than complete destruction, time will tell. Nevertheless, Trump, emboldened by this success, arrived at the summit in The Hague on June 24, 25, and achieved a meaningful result there. Almost all NATO countries, with the exception of Spain, agreed to increase defense spending to 5% of gross domestic product by 2035. This is a major achievement. No subsequent president since Ronald Reagan has been able to make progress in this direction.
Успех его заключался в том, что члены НАТО почти все, я исключаю Испанию, согласились с тем, что эти страны до 1935 года будут вносить по 5% от своего внутреннего валового продукта в свою оборонную промышленность. Это очень важно. Это колоссальный успех Трампа. Почему? Признаться, со времен Рональда Рейгана каждый из президентов последующих пытался что-то сделать в этом направлении безуспешно.
Trump has succeeded, and for that he should be commended. It's really encouraging. He also had what he said was a very meaningful conversation with Zelensky, which is significant. This was a continuation of the positive momentum started at their 15-minute meeting at the Vatican. At the Hague summit, that line was further developed. Zelensky built a smart dialogue by expressing appreciation for Trump and the United States, which was especially important amid criticism from Vance, who accused him of ingratitude. However, Zelensky has always expressed gratitude, contrary to such recriminations. All of this has had an impact, and it's worth recalling that Trump publicly promised Zelensky assistance in providing Ukraine with a Patriot missile defense system. That statement carries weight, given that it came from Trump's own mouth. These positive signals are especially important against the backdrop of the tragedy that occurred on the night of June 29th, when Russia launched a massive strike on Ukraine, using more than 600 drones and missiles, an unprecedented attack.
Систем противовоздушной обороны Patriots. Это очень важно. Это из уст самого Трампа. Вот эти вот хорошие мотивы. И, конечно же, вот эта трагедия очередная, обрушившаяся на Украину в ночь на 29 июня, когда Россия атаковала как никогда Украину более чем 600 дронами и ракетами,
The attack hit Kyiv in particular, causing destruction and the deaths of civilians, including children. This information reaches Trump. He sees what is happening and hears threats from Medvedev and Putin. Putin's statement made in St. Petersburg that he wants all of Ukraine, and that wherever a Russian soldier sets foot, it is Russian territory has also reached him. Everything was said openly, without masks or reservations. Trump heard this and began to realize that he shouldn't keep pretending to be naive. He had already admitted once that Putin was leading him around by the nose, and now the accumulated facts pushed him to rethink. His promise to Senator Lindsey Graham that he would be willing to support tough sanctions legislation may be realized soon. I recall that at the Hague summit, Trump announced his intention to have a phone conversation with Putin next week. But a week has passed, and there has been no call.
Уже однажды говорил, что Путин его водит за нос. И в этот раз он вот это все накопившееся, оно дало Трампу толчок к прозреванию. И, конечно же, его обещание вот этому, я считаю, выдающемуся сенатору Линдси Грэму о том, что он вот, уже вот готов дать добро на принятие закона вот с этими драконовскими санкциями, это уже может произойти в ближайшее время. Я вам добавлю, если вы помните, еще будучи в Гааге, на саммите Трамп обещал провести телефонный разговор с Путиным. Буквально на следующую неделю, как он говорил. Но проходит неделя, никаких звонков со стороны Трампа Путину нет.
I don't think the phone conversation will happen anytime soon, but even if it does, it will be quite different than Trump planned while in The Hague. The situation has changed, and the new developments are clearly not in Putin's favor. Now Trump will no doubt speak from a position of strength, demonstrating his trump cards, as he himself likes to put it. He has already started to announce his intention to help Ukraine with the supply of missile defense systems. According to reliable sources, it is known that certain types of weapons are already being delivered without wide publicity. In addition, there is an initiative in both houses of Congress to collect signatures for a new military budget allocated separately for Ukraine, similar to the April 20th, 2024, $61 billion aid package, which in fact amounted to about $80 billion. A similar draft of a new budget for Ukraine is already under active discussion.
Я, если еще вам добавлю, что есть уже инициатива внутри Конгресса в обеих палатах по сбору подписей под новый бюджет, военный бюджет отдельно для Украины, точно так же, как это, если помните, было принято в 2024 году, 20 апреля, так называемый 61 миллиард, а на самом деле там было 80 миллиардов украинских. Так вот, подобный проект бюджета для Украины уже, знаете, вот обговаривается.
The discussion is being conducted with the expectation that this budget will then be presented to Trump for his approval. This is of key importance. We are talking about completely different types of weapons, of higher quality and in greater volume. The reason is that Trump, having realized the ineffectiveness of the appeasement policy, has himself admitted that there are two paths to peace for Ukraine, the easy path and the hard path. The easy way has already been ruled out. The hard way remains, and it starts with the imposition of tough sanctions. In addition, arms supplies are now inevitable. No one has suggested or demanded the involvement of manpower, and Ukraine has never asked for it. The Ukrainian military demonstrates heroism on a daily basis, which is recognized even in the international media. It is therefore sufficient to provide Ukraine with modern weapon systems. We are talking in particular about ATAC-MS missiles for HIMARS with an extended range.
Украинские солдаты демонстрируют героизм каждый день, в любом уголке России. И это все средства массовой информации это отмечают. Поэтому достаточно помочь Украине современными видами вооружений. Это вы все хорошо об этом знаете. Это те же атакамсы для хаймерсов большого радиуса действия,
That's one. The second is the Patriot missile defense system. We are not talking about 1 or 2 installations or even 10. Ukraine, as Zelensky asked, needs at least 20 such systems. In my opinion, at least 50 are needed to reliably protect all regional centers and key energy facilities critical to the country's security. 19 European NATO member states have these systems at their disposal. If each of them provided at least 1 or 2 installations, Ukraine would already be reliably protected. In that case, the destruction and human casualties we are witnessing today would have been avoided. This is of key importance. We also need to provide Ukraine with F-16 fighter jets. Trump ordered the Pentagon a month ago to start additional training for Ukrainian pilots, in addition to the existing training. We are not talking about 1 or 2 pilots, but several dozen. All of this together indicates that Trump is beginning to gradually realize reality. His manifesto, proclaimed in his first days in the White House, of a world based on strength, is only now beginning to materialize. This is what many are waiting for, not a return to the idea of a world based on trade. There can be no trade with enemies. Iran cannot be left out in this context. Despite Trump's claims that the threat has been rolled back, Ayatollah is still alive and he still has supporters. He continues to issue daily threats against Israel and the US, a clear example of the continuing danger.
Я не могу не коснуться в связи с этим Ирана. Хотя Трамп говорит, вот мы там отбросили, но ничего подобного. Айатолла еще жив, еще есть те, кто ему поддакивает, те, кто его еще поддерживает. Вот самый наглядный пример угрозы, которые изрыгает этот Айатолла каждый день и в адрес Израиля, и в адрес Америки.
By celebrating daily so-called victories over Israel and the US, Iran demonstrates that it does not recognize defeat. A little time has passed and this enemy of Western civilization has never raised the white flag. There has been no capitulation. Iran has not conceded defeat, has not abandoned its nuclear program, and probably won't as long as Ayatollah lives. It continues to support proxy groups such as Hezbollah, Hamas, and the Houthis. The Hussites are still destabilizing the Middle East and shelling Israel. Hamas continues to exist because it is certain. Iran has not lost or been defeated. All of this suggests that the conflict is far from over. Trump must remember that an unkilled enemy will never become an ally, not in the case of Russia or Iran. Talk of a truce under such circumstances is unacceptable. The US has all the resources and strategic advantages it needs to eliminate the threat posed by the Putin regime and Iranian leadership without direct military intervention. All that is required is political will.
Причем, я еще раз говорю, у Америки есть все козыри без личного участия решить проблему путинского режима и режима Аятолл в Иране. Есть все возможности. Только нужна воля. Нужна воля.
Of course, we would like to see not only statements by Donald Trump and his supporters in the Senate, but also real actions. Nevertheless, even these statements are already influencing the Kremlin and Russian propaganda. Peskov, for example, called Lindsey Graham an inveterate Russophobe and accused Ukraine and the US of dragging out negotiations. Thus, Moscow is actually shifting responsibility to Washington. In this situation, Trump must demonstrate how quickly he is able to take decisive measures and influence the development of events. How many meetings have there been with Witkoff in Moscow, in Istanbul, and in Arab countries? But where is the result? Putin does not benefit from ending the war. He does not need it. He is comfortable with a protracted conflict because a transition to a peaceful phase would bring down a wave of internal problems for which he is totally unprepared. Much of what has been hidden will come to light, and then Russians who still blindly trust their leader will begin to have an epiphany, realizing what has been happening, what is happening, and what awaits the country. Obviously, even Russian experts recognize the dire situation. Gref, the head of Sberbank, is on record as saying that a recession is looming. It is already on the horizon. Suffice it to recall that after European countries adopted the 17th package of sanctions in April, already in May, just a month later, Russia's National Welfare Fund, which had $42 billion in it, shrank by $6 billion.
Рецессия неизбежна, она уже, знаете, на горизонте. И если к этому добавить, что достаточно было европейским странам принять 17-й, я подчеркиваю, до 18-го, 17-й пакет санкций, это было в апреле, то уже в мае, через месяц после принятия этого пакета санкций, тот самый фонд благосостояния, в который состоял из 42 миллиардов долларов, упал за один месяц на 6 миллиардов.
If we add to that the worldwide hunt for Russian oil tankers that are part of the so-called shadow fleet, the number of which, according to official data, is about 238 vessels flying different flags, it becomes clear how serious the situation is. The losses of the National Welfare Fund have already amounted to $6 billion, from 42 to 36 billion. If the US adopts tough sanctions measures, which are much more serious than the 17th and 18th packages of the European Union, the consequences will be devastating. In that case, by the end of the year, the fund could be a mere formality, especially if Russian energy supplies to China and India, the two main buyers, begin to decline. This will create a vacuum that Russia will not be able to fill quickly.
Танкерами нефтяными российскими, входящими в теневой флот, по официальным данным их где-то набирается 238, то бороздящих мировой океан под различными флагами.
All this has been taken into account and is under control. If Trump really gets down to business, and all indications are that he is ready for it, one can imagine what processes will begin inside Russia itself. If we add to this the supply of American weapons to Ukraine, and the Ukrainian forces are already demonstrating success, the Russian army offensive has been stopped, as many foreign military experts confirm. Then, with additional support from new types of weapons, Ukraine's victory will be a matter of time. In such a case, it will be Putin who will be forced to urgently ask for a ceasefire. Then the situation will take on a completely different character. It looks like we do not have long to wait.
И тогда уже Путин сам будет просить перемирия срочно, не откладывая. Вот тогда будет довольно интересно. Я думаю, осталось ждать недолго.
Trump's special envoy for Ukraine, Keith Kellogg, criticized the statement by Kremlin spokesman Dmitry Peskov that the progress of peace talks depends on the USA and Ukraine. He called the comments Orwellian and emphasized that Russia's accusations that the US and Ukraine are slowing down the negotiation process have no basis. He said Trump has been consistent and relentless in seeking progress in ending the war. Kellogg called for an immediate ceasefire and a transition to trilateral talks. He said that Russia cannot continue to stall while continuing to bomb civilian targets in Ukraine. These words he published in social network X. At the same time, the emphasis was placed on the possibility of a trilateral format: Trump, Putin, Zelensky. Ukraine supports such an initiative and declares readiness for a meeting at the level of leaders. The question is whether such a meeting will take place at all, even if Trump starts imposing sanctions and supplying weapons to Ukraine.
Будет ли такая встреча вообще, даже если сейчас условно Дональд Трамп будет вводить санкции и давать оружие Украине?
Look, what's the point of Trump attending the meeting if he doesn't support the key principles Ukraine insists on? First of all, the country's independence. The second principle is Ukraine's right to decide for itself whether to join any alliances. This is a sovereign decision, and it is not subject to external dictates. The third, no less important point is the recognition of Ukraine's sovereignty over the temporarily occupied territories. This should be clearly stated in any agreement between Ukraine and Russia. Ukraine will never agree to the loss of its territories within the 1991 borders, regardless of external pressure or political circumstances. This must be unconditionally accepted. In return, Ukraine can guarantee that it will not attack Moscow, Rostov, or other cities on Russian territory. Ukraine has already proven that it is capable of acting responsibly and effectively.
Вот это должно быть, знаете, красной нитью проведено, знаете, вот в договоре или там, как хотите назовите, соглашении между Украиной и Россией. То есть Украина никогда не смирится с оккупированными территориями в пределах границ 91 года. Как бы кто бы что бы ни говорил. Вот это должно быть принято. А в свою очередь Украина обещает не атаковать Москву, не атаковать там Ростов, кого хотите. Украина уже доказала, что она может все.
The Spider's Web project, implemented with jeweler's precision, has clearly demonstrated what Ukraine is capable of. Almost every week, the world learns about new achievements of Ukrainian developers in the field of armaments. More and more often, the possibility of producing Ukrainian ballistic missiles with a range of 1,000, 2,000, and even 3,000 kilometers is being discussed. If we add to this the support of the West, first of all the United States, by supplying the necessary materials and technologies, the issue will be solved. Ukraine will be able to conduct a counter-offensive with such force that no one will be able to stop it. The principle will become simple and fair. A blow to Kiev will be answered on Arbat, on Red Square, on any center where aggression comes from. Leave us alone and we will leave you alone. Only on these terms is peace possible. Everything goes to the point that Trump will not sit down at the negotiating table with Putin until Ukraine's interests are clearly defined and agreed upon beforehand. And that is how it should be. It cannot be otherwise. Putin is demanding a complete surrender from Ukraine. Peskov said bluntly that Russia is ready to stop hostilities only if Ukraine accepts the conditions announced by Putin back in June last year. We are talking about recognizing Russian jurisdiction over Donetsk, Luhansk, Kherson, Zaporizhzhia regions, and Crimea. In addition, Moscow insists on the lifting of all sanctions and Ukraine's neutral, non-aligned, and nuclear-free status.
Донецкую, Луганскую, Херсонскую, Запорожскую области и Крым. Кроме того, диктатор потребовал признания и снятия санкций и нейтральный, внеблоковый, безъядерный статус Киева.
It is clear that the Ukrainian authorities will not agree to such conditions. The question arises whether any of the European partners can influence Putin. It recently became known that he had a telephone conversation with French President Emmanuel Macron. They discussed the war in Ukraine and Iran's nuclear program. Macron called for an immediate ceasefire and offered to continue the dialogue. The conversation lasted more than 2 hours, and according to French media, the French president insisted on a cessation of hostilities as soon as possible. Putin, for his part, complained that the war was allegedly the result of Western policies, which he said had turned Ukraine into an anti-Russian bridgehead. He also said that the root causes and new realities on the ground must be taken into account to resolve the conflict. This call to Macron is not accidental. Putin sensed the change in rhetoric from Trump and decided to address what he considers the most vulnerable link in the anti-Putin coalition in the West.
Вы знаете, он не случайно, Путин, говорил с Макроном. Почему? Да потому что он почувствовал изменение тона трамповского. И он знает, что в такой небольшой цепи антипутинской на Западе Макрон является слабейшим, знаете, вот звеном.
Macron has always been prone to hesitation, and this is well known. His repeated visits to Putin, his attempts to persuade him, his meetings around the long table, all this became part of the so-called Macron syndrome. He sought peacemaking, but often came away without results. Putin has an excellent sense of who to talk to and how to talk, what weaknesses to press. Now he is again resorting to an old tactic, probing Macron, one of the most vulnerable leaders of the West. A couple of calls, and according to his calculations, Macron may make concessions. However, the decisive word today will be Trump's. It is he who will determine the further vector. There is also encouraging news. German Chancellor Friedrich Merz is showing firmness and appears to be taking European leadership. This is crucially important. If Merz and Trump work out a joint strategy to end the war, it will no doubt be in Ukraine's interests.
Только за Трампом. Ну, правда, есть хорошая новость в другом. Знаете, вот эта вот твердость Мерца, вот этого канцлера Германии, очень важная, очень важная. Он сегодня практически берет лидерство европейское на себя, судя по всему. Окей, и я думаю, что вот эти два лидера, Мерц Европе и Трамп, они выработают общую стратегию окончания войны в Украине. И она будет в пользу Украины. Я в этом не сомневаюсь.
Of course, we would like to receive weapons from Merz and Macron, Taurus, Scalp, and Storm Shadow missiles, exactly the kind of missiles that have recently been striking the territory of the Russian Federation and the temporarily occupied territories. Boris Yakovlevich, at the same time we realize that Putin will definitely not agree to withdraw troops from Ukrainian territories and is unlikely to agree to a ceasefire, even if he is pressured from all sides. How to deal with him then? Perhaps we should get US approval for Putin's elimination.
Вот как тогда с ним справиться? Возможно, нам стоит получить добро от США ликвидировать Путина?
After Trump started dialogue with Ayatollah, it is unlikely that he will decide to eliminate Putin. He is not yet ready for such a step. However, Trump has levers that he has not yet utilized. First of all, arms supplies to Ukraine. This is a key factor. The success of the Ukrainian armed forces on the front is the best way to make Putin say, I am ready to negotiate even today. This is what we should strive for. There is no other way. Only arming Ukraine. Nothing more is required. The Ukrainians are an invincible people, and they have proven it in 3.5 years. No force has been able to break them. Despite all the difficulties and internal problems, the will of the Ukrainian people remains unbreakable. This is what inspires the West to support them. Give weapons and nothing else is needed. It is worse when you have weapons but no will. And here is a unique case. The will is there, only the means are lacking. And this will is not fading. Look how long the people have been holding on.
При всех бедах, при всех проблемах, все, что есть в Украине, это недостатки, это приемлемо, это очевидно. Но одно, несомненно, воля народа, она несгибаема. Вот это дает, знаете, вот оптимизм Западу помочь украинцам. Оружие дайте, больше ничего не нужно. Хуже, когда есть оружие, но нет воли. А вот тут наоборот, впервые западная цивилизация столкнулась с феноменом, когда есть воля, не хватает оружия только. А воля держится. Вы посмотрите, сколько народ держится, сколько времени.
With all the tragedies that take place every day in Ukraine, with all the scale of the real genocide, it is unacceptable to remain indifferent, to look at it through our fingers and hope that if we cede a part of the territory to Putin, he will calm down. It is an illusion. That is why Ukraine is now ready to withdraw from the Ottawa Convention banning anti-personnel mines. Let me remind you that 160 countries signed this document, pledging not to use such types of weapons. Ukraine, which then joined the agreement, is now forced to abandon it for the sake of its own security. Moreover, a number of countries bordering Russia are considering a similar move. This is a response to a real threat. Putin already openly states that Ukraine is his territory, and no one doubts that the next target could be the Baltics. He has repeatedly talked about restoring the influence of the former Soviet Union. His intentions are obvious, and to ignore them is to jeopardize not only Ukraine, but all of Europe.
А где гарантия, что не сегодня-завтра тот же Путин, который уже открыто заявляет, что Украина его, а кто не сомневается, следующим будет Прибалтика, вся полностью. И там, конечно же, восстановление влияния бывшего Советского Союза, как Путин не раз произносил, самый первый раз он это произнес.
I often remind you that back in 2007, at the Munich Security Conference, Putin said that he considered the collapse of the Soviet Union to be the greatest tragedy of the 20th century. Today, he is consistently pursuing the goal of restoring this empire. That is why Ukraine's withdrawal from the Ottawa Convention banning anti-personnel mines is a logical and necessary step. There is no other choice. Poland, the Baltic states, and other neighbors of Russia are also beginning to strengthen their borders, using anti-personnel mines for protection. According to the Washington Institute for the Study of War, more than 800 Ukrainian civilians have already died because of the mines that Russian troops have literally peppered Ukrainian soil with. And that's not counting the soldiers who are blown up in these fields. Today, Ukraine is the most mined country in the world. According to experts, it will take at least 10 years to clear the entire territory of mines. Imagine the scale of the tragedy that the country is experiencing.
Уже не считают там солдат, которые проходили там через эти поля и так далее. 800 мирных жителей. Вы можете такое представить? И более того, этот же институт говорит, что для того, что сегодня Украина самая заминированная страна в мире. И для того, чтобы очистить вот эту многострадальную украинскую землю от мин, взрывчатых веществ, понадобится не менее 10 лет. Вот представьте себе, что творится в Украине.
Imagine, against this background, American corporations are already aiming to work in Ukraine, in the field of rare earth metals, uranium mining, oil and gas processing using advanced geological exploration technologies. Ukraine can show the world how rich its resources are, but how can American companies start working if staying there is life-threatening? Therefore, regardless of political fluctuations, the United States is obliged to provide Ukraine with the Patriot missile defense system, close the sky, and help begin large-scale demining using modern technologies. We have already discussed this in the first months of the war, when the United States began supplying robot dogs, unique devices capable of detecting and defusing explosives. These machines cost more than $1 million each, but they save lives and allow us to return security to the liberated territories.
Я вам напомню, одно время мы с вами об этом говорили, пару лет назад, когда война только началась. И тогда еще Америка стала поставлять собак-роботов. Вы помните? Это изумительнейшие собаки-роботы, которые могут находить взрывчатые вещества и даже обезвреживать. Они очень дорогие. Это устройство более $1 миллиона каждое стоит.
However, the production of these robot dogs is in full swing, and I have no doubt that a significant batch will soon be sent to Ukraine. We are actively lobbying for this issue, especially after the Institute for the Study of War published horrific data. More than 800 civilians have already died from mines, not counting soldiers and agricultural workers, who also become victims. Agricultural equipment is being blown up. Fields are left unsuitable for work. All this requires an immediate start of large-scale demining. This is critically important. There are many problems today, and I am sure that Trump is aware of all this. His team is working. Returning to your question, I will say, Trump will most likely not decide to physically eliminate Putin. But there is no need. Give Ukraine the opportunity to act. Ukrainians are capable of anything. They do not need anything except weapons. They have a mind. They have a will. They have hands. That is enough.
Еще раз говорю, дайте это сделать самой Украине. Украинцы могут все. Могут все. Ни в чем другом украинцы не нуждаются. Дайте только оружие. Там есть мозги, там есть руки. Все. Больше ничего не нужно.
Things are indeed getting tense. The Senate passed Trump's tax bill, the one big beautiful bill, by the slimmest of margins, with Vice President G.D. Vance casting the deciding vote. The bill has drawn criticism, including from Elon Musk, with whom Trump already had a tense relationship. The conflict escalated after Trump made harsh comments about Musk, including threats of deportation and bizarre comments about his daughter. Musk, in typical X fashion, responded that, "It's so tempting to escalate this, but I'm holding off for now," clearly hinting at the possibility of retaliation, but leaving some room for maneuver. Let's start with the main thing. Elon Musk began to criticize Trump for not cutting social programs. Moreover, Trump, instead of fighting for the environment and developing alternative energy sources, such as wind turbines and electricity, continues to adhere to his philosophy of drill, 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 my baby. There is an obvious conflict of interests here. On the one hand, Trump supports electric cars, electrification, nuclear energy, and on the other, he opposes traditional methods of energy production such as oil, gas, and coal. This is one aspect. The second point is no less important. Today, the American economy produces goods and services worth about $5 trillion a year and spends about $7 trillion. Thus, the annual deficit is about $2 trillion.
Электрические машины, например, за электризацию многих вещей, за атомную энергетику и категорически против, например, вот использования классических методов добычи энергии. Это нефть, газ, например, и уголь, вот, например, вот так вот. Это одно. И второе, самое интересное. Вы знаете о том, что мы, американцы, наша экономика сегодня зарабатывает в год в денежном выражении товаров и услуг на $7 триллионов. А вот тратим, вы знаете, вот мы, то есть зарабатываем на 5, прошу прощения, на 5 триллионов, а тратим на 7 триллионов. То есть у нас дефицит каждый год составляет порядка 2 триллиона.
Based on the bill that just passed the Senate by a slim margin, Elon Musk estimates that the deficit will increase and could reach $3 trillion within 10 years. Trump says, "Wait a minute, Donald, you invited me, and we created a team to improve the efficiency of government institutions. We started doing it, and we were pretty successful. Indeed, they have already managed to save about $200 billion, $185 billion to be exact." Elon Musk has grandiose plans. It was thanks to him that taxpayers first learned that under Obama and Biden, fictitious projects were created that undermine the efficiency of government structures. Moreover, these projects are inflated and finance so-called non-profit organizations that act against the foundations of American society. They spread the ideas of socialism and Marxism and are engaged in the ideological processing of students, the same ones who today take to the streets in their thousands with anti-American, anti-Israeli, and anti-Semitic slogans.
Мы впервые, налогоплательщики, узнали о том, что именно при Обаме, Байдене, знаете, созданы такие лжепроекты, которые практически сводят на нет эффективность работ государственных институтов. Мало того, они раздуты. Так, плюс к этому они кормят такие так называемые некоммерческие организации, которые существуют и действуют направленными на подрыв самих устоев нашего общества. Это распространение социализма, марксизма, это промывание мозгов студентам, тем самым студентам, которые сегодня тысячами выходят на улицы с антиамериканскими, с антиизраильскими, с антисемитскими лозунгами, транспарантами.
These projects have even become a source of funding for terrorist organizations such as Hezbollah, Hamas, and structures linked to Iran. Elon Musk has uncovered all of this. He also wondered why a congressman or senator who earns $175,000 a year and started his or her career with a bank account of about $100,000 suddenly becomes a millionaire after 5 or 6 years in the legislature. Musk openly asks the question, where do these millions come from? As an example, he cited Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, who used to work as a bartender and lived in extreme austerity, and after less than 4 years in Congress, she already has about $8 million in her accounts. Musk offers to find out where she got this money. And it's not just her, he has a whole list. In this way, Elon Musk helps ordinary Americans see how the system really works.
Откуда эти миллионы? Например, он этот вопрос обратил к некой Александрии Окасии-Кортес, у которой сегодня... Она была бартендер, знаете, барменшей. И вдруг, вы знаете, с копейками жила, перебиваясь. И случайно оказавшись в Конгрессе, вот так вот, она вдруг сегодня, уже проработав где-то меньше 4 лет в Нижней Палате, уже на ее счету 8 миллионов. Она говорит, вопрос, давайте поинтересуемся, откуда эти деньги. И не только у нее, у многих там, у нее там целый список. То есть, вы понимаете, Илон Маск помогает нам, американцам, рядовым американцам.
Look what happened next. Elon Musk tells Trump, "You invited me to save government money, and you supported a project that could become law. Now this bill is sent to the lower house after a vote in the Senate, where it passed with difficulty. There may be problems there too. If it does pass, then the question arises, why didn't you, first of all, touch the middle class? You left Medicaid, you cut it a little, but you didn't cut social programs as much as you should have. Trump can't do this because he is thinking about the midterm elections next year. If he starts touching the interests of the middle class and cutting social programs now, as Elon Musk insists, he risks losing the support of voters. Today, he is focused on the elections in both houses. His proposals are passing with great difficulty. A good example is the vote in the Senate, 50-50, while the Republicans have 53 votes and the Democrats 47. Nevertheless, 3 Republicans voted with the Democrats.
Просто, знаете, избиратели отвернутся от Трампа. Он не может это все сделать сегодня. Трамп думает о выборах на следующий год в обе палаты. Вы посмотрите, с каким трудом проходит его предложение сегодня. Вот наглядный пример. 50-50 было голосование сегодня. Причем 53 у нас республиканских голосов в Сенате и 47 демократов. Так вот, 3 республиканца присоединились к демократам.
When the vote was 50-50, Vice President Vance, who has the right to cast the deciding vote in the event of a tie, was forced to intervene. It was his vote that determined the fate of the so-called Big Beautiful Bill. However, this is not the end of it. Now the bill goes to the lower chamber, where internal squabbles will begin. There are 220 Republicans and 215 Democrats in the House of Representatives. There are also opponents of Trump there. Nevertheless, it is worth noting that Ukrainian issues were heard during the vote in the Senate. Senator Lindsey Graham, who previously said that he played golf and discussed politics with Trump, repeatedly mentioned Ukraine in his speech, making it clear, "I will support, but remember, Ukraine is important." Ted Cruz, John Kennedy from Louisiana, and even John Thune, the leader of the Senate majority, spoke in the same way. In other words, Ukraine and Israel remain in the center of attention of legislators who are putting pressure on Trump and making it clear that there will be support, but under certain conditions. Trump already realizes this and is starting to not just talk, but act, and this is one of the key factors that inspires optimism.
Точно так же и Джон Кеннеди из Луизианы, например, и даже Джон Тюн, глава сенатского большинства. Другими словами, запомните, Украина и Израиль есть, знаете, сегодня и будут в умах законодателей, которые постоянно давят на Трампа и говорят, имей в виду, мы поддерживаем, но при одном условии. Вот это должно быть. И он обещает. Вот это еще один из главнейших факторов, знаете, вот, дающих нам оптимизм, что Трамп уже прозревает настолько, что он будет начинать уже действовать, а не просто говорить.
This is what we are all counting on. Boris, thank you for the interesting conversation and the time you spent on our broadcast. Have a nice day. Let me remind you that Boris Pincus was with us. Friends, write your comments, like this video, and indicate from which country and city you are watching us. Don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube. Thank you all for your attention. Until next time, thank you very much. We will win. There is not much time left. Let's be patient. Hope dies last. Glory to Ukraine. Glory to the heroes.
Давайте наберемся терпения. Надежда умирает последней. И слава Украине.
Героям слава!